Good evening. Welcome to City Council meeting for November 10th, 2020. Seating or attendance at this meeting is limited under Directive 006 from Governor Sisolak as amended and modified by subsequent directives. Items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. Two or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. With that, I will call the meeting to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it appears we have a public announcement by City Manager Michael Mays.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Wanted to highlight a couple of historic preservation initiatives for the benefit of the community. The Historic Preservation Committee has been celebrating Historic Preservation Month through October and into November. How they are celebrating historic preservation initiatives in our community is they have been producing videos highlighting historically significant properties within our community. We would encourage everybody to go to the city's website under the Community Development Department and Historic Preservation page, and you can click on the links to view those videos. In addition, the city is currently working with the Nevada Preservation Foundation in the development of a historic preservation plan for the community. As part of that process, the city is seeking community input in that plan. And if residents are interested in participating in a survey that's being prepared by the Nevada Preservation Foundation, we have extended the deadline for receipt of those responses to the end of November. Residents can call the Community Development Department at 702-293-9282 and can get more information on how they can participate in that survey. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move to our initial public comment period. Public comment during this portion of the meeting must be related to an item on the agenda. Each person will have up to 5 minutes to speak. And as always, we ask everyone to be concise and civil. Thank you. Anyone wishing to call in may do so at 702-589-9629. Do we have anyone in attendance who would wish to speak in public comment? All right, the phone number again, anyone wishing to call in is 702-589-9629. Again, the phone number, anyone wishing to speak in the initial public comment period, the number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails or voicemails?
Yes, 2 written emails.
Please go ahead.
This is from Neil Parks regarding the fire code. All cities and counties in the state of Nevada have adopted the 2018 fire codes within their fire departments. The only fire department that has not adopted the 2018 code is Boulder City Fire Department. Boulder City is still under the 2012 code. Please explain why that is. And the next one is from Judy DeShane regarding item 8, sale of tract 350. The last evaluation given at a council meeting was ridiculous when it was reported that developers, builders said it was too high. Most of these are 10 and 15,000 square foot lots, and I can't imagine builders and developers putting up small homes. I am sure they will be commanding over $500,000 as Storybook is having no problem selling their 7,000 square foot lot homes at $400,000 plus. Builders, developers should not be the determining authority as to what we sell our land for. Land is owned by the citizens, not staff or builders. We deserve a fair price. Item number 9, search firms. I have no direct knowledge of any of them, but the council needs to establish working terms and compensation before looking for people to fill these positions. We are a community of only 16,000 citizens. We do not need two $250,000 per year employees. The idea of hiring an employee and telling them to dictate their pay and benefits is ridiculous. I would be willing to bet the majority of citizens have never been hired and got to then decide how much they were getting paid and what special privileges they were worth. Item number 10, ballot questions. Ballot questions need to be far more definitive than the last ones were. We need to know we are on the hook for and exactly what we will get for our money. Citizens need and deserve a clear explanation of what and how dedicated lease funds are used for. Should also include a sunset clause as things and priorities change over time. Item 11, airport CARES money. The fuel storage has been a problem for at least 4 or 5 years now, at least as far as what's been stated at various times at council meetings. And the service refueling is a joke from what I've heard from users. So let's fix it now. Last I heard it would take $1 million or so to fix, although that may be higher now. Leftover funds should be used for any necessary repairs or upgrades to the hangars that are now the responsibility of the airport. And that was Judy DeShane, and that's it for written public comments.
Thank you. And hearing no callers, we will go ahead and close the public comment period and move to approval of the regular agenda. Madam City Clerk, any changes?
No changes.
Mr. City Manager?
No changes.
And we have Madam City Attorney participating via phone. Any changes, Madam City Attorney?
No changes.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to council. Any changes for the regular agenda?
No changes.
Anyone wishing to make a motion for acceptance then?
I move to approve the regular agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move to the consent agenda. Again, any changes, Madam City Clerk?
Yes, Mayor, staff is requesting to remove item number 3, please.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager
No further changes.
and Madam City Attorney?
No further changes.
Thank you. Council, any changes for the consent agenda? Councilmember Bridges?
I wish to move item number 4 to the regular agenda.
Thank you. Any other changes? Councilmember Bridges, would you like to make a motion then?
I move to accept the consent agenda, except for moving item number 4 to the regular agenda.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We will then move to item number 4, CDBG grants, Community Development Block Grants. Mr. Mays.
Each year, the city enters into an interlocal agreement with the county regarding allocation of our annual community development block grant funds. For fiscal year 21, that amount is $241,318. Before you this evening are 3 agreements. The first is an interlocal with the county, which memorializes the disbursement of these funds. And the subsequent agreements are also annual agreements between the city and Emergency Aid and Lend a Hand for the disbursement of their funds. Specifically for Emergency Aid, the dollar amount is $26,787, and for Lend a Hand, it is $9,411. And just as a reminder to the community, with the allocation we receive from the county each year, per federal guidelines, we're only able to disperse 15% of those total funds toward Lend a Hand and Emergency Aid. The balance goes toward capital projects. And as you can see in the staff report, based on prior approvals from the City Council on the capital plan, that would include monies to help with the senior center, rehab, as well as St. Jude's. And I can answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Councilmember Bridges?
Yes, I just wanted to disclose a conflict of interest, as I have been the grant coordinator for Emergency Aid of Boulder City for the past 6 years, and I administer the CDBG grant. So therefore, I will be abstaining from voting on this item.
Thank you. And I also wish to disclose I volunteer at the Senior Center for delivery of Meals on Wheels. I have no pecuniary or financial interests. I don't believe it presents any conflict. Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, I also volunteer, and so does my daughter, for the Senior Center for Meals on Wheels, but it will not influence my vote.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the Community Development Block Grants? Okay, we have 3 separate resolutions, so we'll begin with Resolution 7180.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 7180.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution 7181, agreement with Emergency Aid.
I can do that again. I'll just go down the line. I move to approve resolution number 7181.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the third one, Resolution 7182 with Lend a Hand.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 7182, resolution with the City of Boulder City and Lend a Hand.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Mays. That brings us to item number 5, introduction of Bill 1890, adoption of the 2018 International Fire Code.
Mayor, I'd like to introduce Bill number 1890 with title, waive the reading.
Thank you.
Bill number 1890, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, to amend Title VI of the City Code to adopt the 2018 International Fire Code and the 2018 Southern Nevada Consensus Fire Code Amendments as a Boulder City Fire Code. Bill number 1890 will be considered at the November 24th regular City Council meeting.
Thank you. Item number 6, consideration of Bill 1888 for Boulder Flats Solar Project. We have Ms. Pelletier, the Finance Director.
Good evening. Diane Pelletier, Finance Director, City of Boulder City. Tonight you have before you consideration of Bill number 1888, which is an ordinance of the City of Boulder City approving agreement number 20-1903 between the City of Boulder City, Nevada and Boulder Flats Solar LLC for an option to lease approximately 1,100 acres of land for the development of a utility-scale solar energy plant in the El Dorado Valley. Okay, a little overview on this. In September 2019, IBV Energy Partners were selected as the successful respondent to an RFP for the development of a solar energy project. The project site is up to 1,100 acres at the mouth of Dutchman's Pass that has been designated as Black Hills South by Boulder City. The lease is for 25 years with 4 5-year options. The lease rate is $1,600 per acre with a 2% annual increase. And over the 25-year lease term, it should generate approximately $62 million in rent revenues. A little bit additional background on the RFP process. The city, when they went out for bid on this in 2019, received 11 responses with, and 2 proposals rose to the top, with the deciding factor being the PPA by the winning bid. IBV Energy Partners best met the requirements of the RFP, most notably that they had the power purchase agreement and had the best proposed lease price at $1,600 per acre per year for the subject area. Unlike other solar projects, Boulder City can obtain power from this solar project. The city will purchase up to 5 megawatts of energy through SNWA once this whole project gets going, and they will hold the power purchase agreement for this project. And the other thing I want to add is it's taken a while to get here tonight, and that was because of COVID-19. It created a lot of postponements and logistics in getting things settled. So we will be happy to answer any questions you may have, and we also have representatives here from IBV Energy Partners if you have any questions for them.
Thank you. Any questions from council members? Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. Under the synopsis of the option agreement, on page 365 of our packet, it says the acreage is 1,100 acres. However, in the map further on in the packet, it says it's almost 11 and almost 5 acres additionally. Can you explain that discrepancy?
I think Brock can explain that better, but I'm pretty sure that will be something that is determined once everything gets done. But maybe Brock would add a few comments on that.
They had a formal legal description prepared based on the map that the city provided them. Our map wasn't a legal description. It was based on our GIS, which had come out to an estimated 1,100 acres. When they did a formal legal description doing meets and bounds following the section lines, it came out to 1,104.99 acres. And that's what the option agreement actually references in the whereases, as well as the legal description attached to the option agreement itself.
And since a lot of the figures are based on acreage, would this change, tying up that almost 5 other acres, would that change any of the option agreement terms for payment?
It would not. The option payment amount was derived from what the lease amount would be as a percentage, and the lease amount was based on the 1,104.99, and then we took a percentage of that to come up with a base option agreement number. And then it's escalated. I think we used a 3% each year for the 2 years for the option agreement.
And when this moves to a lease agreement, we would have a better, once a real plan has been made of where everything would be going, we would have a better, more accurate access to what the acreage is per year, because we're doing a rate at $1,600 per acre per year, correct?
That's correct. And to make the city clerk happy, I'm Brock Armitrout, your real estate and contracts manager. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. As with all of our other solar projects, their option size, their lease size is often a little bit different as they carve out lands that they just can't use for one reason or another. And in this particular case, they may exercise it in phases, although right now it looks like 1 phase, but it may end up being 2 phases. And much like the most recent example is Techrin, was a 2,200 acre option, and they ended up exercising it in 5 smaller phases over the period of years. And this would have that same requirement. So at the time they exercise the option into a lease, they would get a formal legal description for what they're actually going to lease, which will be either this number or less. And then the lease rate will be based on that number. So 1,600 times X.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I'll probably need you up here, Brock, for just a second, but just for a little bit of clarity's sake for the public with regards to the power purchase agreement, that's not necessarily power we're just getting the ability to purchase power should that be advantageous to us. Is that correct?
Well, Dennis Porter, our utilities administrator, is out in the hall, but what it is, our power agreement is actually with SNWA, who has the power purchase agreement with Boulder Flat Solar. So they're the formal off-taker receiving the power. And then because SNWA likes all the cities, they've worked out agreements with the cities, and our option is to purchase up to 5 megawatts of this renewable resource. And because we're going through them, they're the balancing authority, not the solar plant. Therefore, we wouldn't have to have spinning reserve if it's as it is now. If we were buying straight from the project itself, it's a different story altogether. But we're not. We're going through SNWA.
Is there any guarantee that that power is in fact the renewable power or solar energy? Is it just that they have the power that they are selling? I know that's kind of more an esoteric question because once it's power, but
It's unfortunately, once an electron enters the grid, the electron that comes out the other side,
understood,
it's much like water. Once the water molecule goes in, it's that the molecule you're taking out the other end. It's part of their portfolio, and we're buying based on that portfolio.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Was that a good explanation, Mr. Porter?
I couldn't have done better myself, but that is correct.
Mr. Porter, while you're here, then, there are periods of time during the year where the power that we get from Hoover Dam is sufficient for our needs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're looking at either the summer months or the winter months when we have to go out on the market and purchase power?
Yeah, so the Water Authority looks at the different loads based on what you said during the different times of year, and they balance those to the best they can for what they purchase on the market, what we get from Hoover, and now what we would be getting eventually from IBV Energy with solar. Because that solar is, for the most part, it is really renewable because the Water Authority's constructing the Gentie line that gets it to the CRC facilities that basically loop around the valley to get that power to the other agencies.
And there was a ballot question that passed last week that I believe it's by the year 2025. All utilities that sell power must get 50% of their energy from a renewable source.
That's correct, and that's why SNWA is so interested in this project, because they have to meet that criteria as well. Fortunately for us, with our Hoover allocation and our other allocations, we're already there. So,
but we're kind of right there. Is that correct?
With the town site project and IBV Energy project, we'll be well ahead of that game.
Okay, and I believe in this project, the power, the agreement that we have would allow us to purchase the power for less than what we normally do through Silver State. Is that correct?
Yeah, I talked to SNWA just recently, and they'll also be here in December for council for the major capital construction program that needs to be approved by this council, which includes that Gentie line in their program. We'll be getting that for around $27 a megawatt, which is almost the same as our Hoover. It's pretty close.
Okay, because I believe that we can pay up to, is it 37 or 39 for the Silver State Co-op?
Yes, yeah, and if they have to buy small on peak, it can even be a little higher than that. It's just for small periods.
All right.
So it's probably roughly a savings of $100,000 to $150,000 a year for the city.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? And we do have representatives here. Anything that you would like to say regarding this project? Ms. Bullen?
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, I can't control myself. Yes, I have to speak. Good evening, Linda Bullen, Bullen Law. I'm 8635 West Sahara, Las Vegas. So thank you, and thank you to the council members. I'm here tonight, and I have 4 individuals from Boulder Solar Flats, so I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and we're all here to answer any questions that you have. And in particular, Mr. Robin Sayes, who's been the lead developer on this, has some words to say in terms of history, the present day situation with the project, and a little bit about the future that we wanted to share with you. So first of all, let's start with the other members of the team that are here. If you want to stand up and introduce yourselves, or sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Pleasure being here in front of you, and thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Timothy Kim. I am the president of IBV Energy Partners, the owner of Boulder Flats Solar.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Aaron Reed, and I'm the executive director, head of development at IBV Energy Partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Manoj Reddy. I'm an executive director and head of power market analytics with IBV Energy.
I'll give you Robin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. My name is Robin Sayes, Vice President of Business Development for IBV Energy Partners, and I've been involved in the project since its inception a couple of years ago, actually. What I wanted to do is kind of talk to you exactly what Linda said about the history of the project, how we got to where we are today, and where we're at and where we're going in the future. But first, I'd like to say thank you to the city and to the staff that's here. I think this is a model for other cities, municipalities, counties, and states to look at for how to do renewable energy development, the way that you set up the processes and the way you deal with land and permitting and everything. I think it's a model. And I think as a developer, it's great to see the way that you're welcoming, but you vet everything properly to make sure it's the best thing for your citizens, and I want to applaud you for that. Thank you very much for being so inviting. So renewable energy projects are, it's a crazy, wonderful life cycle that you go through with these projects. This project began for us as a friend I knew from 3 companies ago, who we keep in contact, and by chance, he'd met someone from SNWA at a water conference a few years back. And he got an email about a RFP from Southern Nevada Water Authority looking for solar power. The company he currently works for, they don't do large scale, they do small scale. So he called me and he said, hey, I think you guys might be interested in this with the scale of projects you do. He sent it to me, and we're like, this is interesting. So the first thing we started doing was looking for land where we could interconnect into SNWA's their transmission system. There's not a lot of land available that's not federal land or that's not out of the way and far from transmission. Started looking, and we saw their system through here. We saw the amount of solar that was here and started doing research. And I tried to call Brock. I couldn't get a hold of Brock, and we had a short time frame to do this. And so, you know what? Why not go to Vegas? So I flew in here and went and knocked on Brock's door and said, hey, I need land. What's going on? He said, well, we've got this piece of property that's going to be coming up soon for a land RFP that you're welcome to bid on like everyone else. So, okay, good, we will. Well, we didn't have time to wait for that, so we went ahead and bid into the RFP for SNWA, and we explained the land situation that it would be coming. And so we did our modeling based off computer simulations of what the irradiance is here and what our power was going to be, so we know what kind of a PPA price we could present. And we did. We bid something that was pretty aggressive, but definitely doable based on the curve of what solar technology was going to be in the year 2022. That's what we bid in, and we won the RFP. So we started negotiating the power purchase agreement and how we were going to do that, but we had to, there's got to be a radio line to get their transmission system, so that had to be negotiated. When we started on that, the land RFP come out, and then Caesars Palace put out a RFP for solar and battery storage. Like, we do both. This is a great marriage because we're looking at this land. The 50 megawatts was only going to take up at the time 350, close to 400 acres. So we had plenty of acreage left to work with here to bid in a solar project plus battery storage to Caesars Palace. And I want to say at the time we bid in around 80 or 85 megawatts of solar with 25 or 30 megawatts of battery storage with using Tesla batteries. And we bid in an aggressive price on that as well. And we got shortlisted. So at the time when we came in and we submitted our bid here, we had one project where we had won a RFP, a power purchase agreement with SNWA, and we were shortlisted to a list of 4 or 5 developers for Caesars Palace, and that was looking good. In our conversations with them, they were very impressed with our pricing, and we were on a good path there. That's when we bid into this process, into your land RFP, and things were looking very good. Well, we did win SNWA. As you know, at the time, we already won that. And then things didn't work out with Caesars Palace. And what was a distinguishing factor was on the SNWA transmission line, we have a transmission fee that we have to pay for that, anything above their 50 megawatts. And that kind of was the deciding factor how we didn't win Caesars Palace. So in the meantime, we continue to negotiate our PPA with SNWA, and that grew from 50 megawatts to 118 megawatts. Now it's down around 110 to 115 is where we're going to shake out. But we have some additional land left on where we're at. Now SNWA is not interested in battery power at this time, but there are entities in your state and locally that are. And we knew it was coming. And NV Energy just put out a RFP last week for solar and battery storage, and it's a significant amount. So with the remaining land, after we build the 110 megawatts for SNWA, we can build another 90 to 95 megawatts of solar plus 30 to 50 megawatts of battery storage that we can add to that we're going to bid into NV Energy's RFP process. There aren't a lot of developers out there that have land, already have a PPA, but also have an interconnect point with available capacity and a system impact study that's already underway, which we have with WAPA. So we feel pretty good about our chances on that as a second phase to come in and build another solar project with battery storage to round out and maximize the land usage for the property that we're here to talk to you about tonight. So again, thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's an exciting project, where we started, where we are, and where we're going. And I look forward to your questions if you have any. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? I would just say, I mean, you know, you've obviously evaluated what we have out there already. I certainly appreciate IBV taking a look at it, understanding the infrastructure that's already there, adding to that, and also making that power available through SNWA to our city. We do have new requirements here in Nevada as of last week. This will help, and we'll actually probably be able to purchase the power at lower cost. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate this, and again, we look forward to your project.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we have Bill 1888.
Mayor, I move to approve Bill number 1888.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Again, thank you very much. Ms. Bullen, thank you as well.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item number 7, consideration of Bill 1889.
Diane Pelletier, Boulder City Finance Director. Consideration of Bill number 1889 is is an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, approving agreement number 20-1904 between the City of Boulder City, Nevada and Laurie Abick to purchase approximately 450 square feet of city-owned land immediately adjacent to the rear yard of 936 Villa Grande Way. As a little background on this, Laurie Abick, who owns residential property located at 936 Villa Grande Way, has requested to purchase from the city approximately 450 square feet along the rear property line of her home. The subject parcel to be purchased is 4.5 feet deep by 100 feet wide and is immediately adjacent to the rear property line of 936 Villa Grande along its entirety. The encroachment is also encumbered by a Southern Cal Edison transmission line easement, which significantly affects what can be constructed within that corridor. A prior property owner had installed a decorative block wall along the rear of the property, but failed to have the property line surveyed, resulting in the placement of a wall 4.5 feet beyond the legal property line. The current property owner discovered the encroachment upon city lands when she applied for a building permit for a swimming pool. During the review of the permit application, it was the city who discovered the encroachment. When notified of the issue, the current property owner wanted to correct the situation by purchasing the additional lands. The City Council authorized the Finance Department to seek appraisals of the subject acreage to be purchased at their regular meeting held on August 11, 2020, under Resolution 7142. The city, if the council approves this, the city will receive $2,273 for the purchase of the land and an additional $4,000 to cover the cost of the appraisals. Per charter, the purchase price will be deposited into the voter-approved capital improvement fund, and the reimbursement for the appraisal cost will be deposited back to the land development fund. There is a representative here from the Abick family if you have questions that for her, or perhaps I can answer some questions that you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Do you have the both appraisals available?
I don't have them here with me, but I believe they were sent out to the council.
Yes, they were.
Okay.
After we had approved going forward with it, we received those later, yes. Within those appraisals, there's one that came in, I believe, a little over 4,000, another came in a little over 3,000. The one that came in a little over 3,000, the appraiser made some type of judgment about the value that the city has, and therefore reduced the amount of the appraisal based on his judgment about the interest of the city, which he had judged to be 10%. I didn't see anything in that indicated how he had arrived at that. Was there something that you know about that?
No.
Okay, so we just get two appraisals, one a little over 4,000, the other one winds up coming in a little over $300 because an appraiser made a decision about something reducing the interest the city has in the property, stating that 90% of the interest in the property belongs to Consolidated Edison, even though they don't own the land.
Well, my understanding about appraisals is each appraiser has their own methodology of how they appraise things, and appraisals can vary significantly.
Well, I believe
from firm to firm.
I believe it's a legal issue, though. We're not talking about an opinion of value here. We're talking about an appraiser making a judgment about what the interest of the city is in the land versus Southern California Edison. And I didn't see in the appraisal how that determination was made. Basically, the appraiser apparently is saying that Boulder City only owns a 10% interest in the land.
I don't really have an answer for that. All I know is I've been told that appraisals, and I've seen since I've been here, appraisals can vary significantly from appraiser to appraiser.
Well, the value that both of them arrived at are within probably $800 of one another, $900. it's the judgment that the city has only a 10% interest in the value of the land because of the easement that's been provided to Southern California Edison. So therefore, he made a judgment call to reduce the value of the land to the city.
I believe an appraisal is a judgment call. I mean,
Yeah, see, I think there's a difference, though, between land value and ownership interest, financial interest. And I don't know that that's within the purview of an appraiser because he doesn't refer to why he came to that decision. Any other questions or comments? Anyone wishing to offer a motion on this bill?
Mayor, I have one comment.
Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. I just wanted to know under number 7, utility easements, the prior agreement didn't really specify or acknowledge the easement that exists with BLM.
that has been added.
And so that item number C has been added.
Yep.
To specifically acknowledge that there is an existing easement granted as part of that agreement.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone wishing to take action on this item?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to accept bill number 1889.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I am opposed, so I believe that is then 4-1 acceptance of the bill. That brings us to item number 8. This is regarding Tract 350, the land around Boulder Creek Golf Course. Mr. Mays?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is at the request of Councilmember Hoskins, and staff wanted to prepare some background material regarding this property so that the council could provide direction to city staff regarding how to proceed and if to proceed with respect to an RFP for this property. So you can see on the screen, we have a map showing the property in question. The property is approximately 45 acres. It is adjacent to the Boulder Creek Golf Course. The property is to the north and to the east of the golf course and is south of Adams. The voters of Boulder City in the 2010 general election voted to sell the land. To help the council with your discussions this evening, staff has included in the packet obviously the map showing the location of the property, a map showing the zoning designations as they are currently represented on the zoning map, and that is also what is on the screen. The 2010 ballot question that was approved, as well as prior guidelines that were included in a prior RFP that went out to developers. And so staff can certainly answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Again, Councilmember Hoskins had asked for this item to be brought forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like to give a little presentation on it. The reason that I wanted to bring this out again is I wanted to have a new fresh start. On at least 2 occasions, the city attempted to sell this property by including numerous requirements for the developers to follow to be able to submit a proposal. These requirements included the type of walls and many other requirements that may not be necessary. I believe these requirements restrict the developers, and as a result, the city never received any proposals. My theory is to start fresh and to allow the developer to develop, and also allow them to submit as many proposals as they want. I suggest the criteria includes only what is required to meet the city standards and not be restrictive, as it has been in the past. For some reason, real estate is booming right now, and this may be the time to readdress this issue. The city has this area approved at least twice, and it will need to be appraised again because it has been more than a year. I would like to hold off on that appraisal until after we receive the proposals because the value could change depending on the use of the property. So I have some questions for the acting city attorney. I brought them up yesterday, but I'll ask them again for record. City attorney, can the appraisal be completed after the proposals are received?
Yes, Councilwoman, the appraisals just need to be, the appraisal has to be, the land sale has to be at the current appraised value, and the appraisal is valid for a year. So the land sale must occur within a year of the appraisal.
Thank you. And should the proposal include, number one, the location of the airport to the property?
There is no legal requirement for the proposal to include the location of the airport.
And number two, should there be a statement concerning the longevity of the golf course and the city not being responsible for any damages due to golf balls?
And again, the proposal does not need to include those. There's no legal requirement. Would be prudent to include those disclosures possibly in a land sale contract prior to the completion of the sale. But that is not required to be in the request for proposal.
Thank you. And I had a question for Acting City Manager, Mr. Mays. What are the city's zoning classifications for the city?
The current zoning classifications for the property in question?
Yes.
There are three, and if we could put the map back up on the screen for reference. So there is R15, R10, and R7. So in our code, when you see the reference to like R110, R110 means that the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet. So in the case, and as you can see with the map, the area noted in yellow is R17, so minimum 7,000 square feet lots, all single family. The light green is the R115. That's the property directly adjacent to the golf course, so minimum lots of 15,000 square feet. And what I will call a tan or beige is the R110, minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet.
Okay, and I have noticed throughout the country that several of the golf courses will have what they call patio homes, which they're small homes that people use for a second home or maybe a vacation home. Do we have a classification for patio homes?
The closest classification that would work for that type of development would be R13, which allows for multifamily development.
Thank you. And should the proposal include the zoning, or can that be dealt with after the proposal is received?
That can certainly be conferred after it is received. You could structure the RFP so that you're just simply asking the developers to respond with their development proposals, and those zoning entitlements can occur later.
Thank you. And I had a question for the Public Works Director, but I don't see him present.
I believe he is here, so.
There he is. Couldn't see through the wall.
Yep.
Can you address the storm drain issue with, would that be something that flood control or any other agency may be able to help us out with this issue?
Now, when I looked into if flood control could actually help pay for this project or the storm portion of it, their requirements is that either it is on their master plan or it's within a quarter mile of a current ongoing flood control district project. So it's neither of those. It's not on their master plan, and it's not, we don't have any ongoing projects within a quarter mile.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And, Mr. Mays, this is approximately 45 acres, correct?
Correct.
Right. So I guess we would open it up for discussion. Would anyone have any questions?
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I think I certainly see the how this could be of benefit in trying to get more RFPs, allowing a little bit more of kind of a tell us what you think you would do, and then we could kind of decide from there. I do start to get a little hesitant with regards to kind of just saying, hey, developers, how do you want to develop? And then having it come back to us and then us, kind of going only to say, actually, this isn't really quite Boulder City. So I think it's good to have, to maybe be a little bit more lenient to allow some of that, but I don't want to go so far as to just completely open it up. At least that's where I'm at right now, to just say whatever goes, because I do think there is a certain quality that we are looking for in this community, and there are certain aspects that people kind of come to expect, and I'd hate to have work be done only to turn it down if they're just coming at us with, let's pack in as many homes as we possibly can. Obviously, there's limits on that here in Boulder City, but that's just where my head is at right now about that. I will say on a personal level, I do feel that we've allowed many large developments. The most recent developments have been big, huge dollar amount homes, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that it would be nice to, when we are considering where things can be, where the next homes could be developed, that we do consider allowing for more. I don't want to call them affordable housing because everybody always thinks that that's a bad word, but homes that the smaller families that are looking for their first home, I think we do need to start looking into that as well. So that's kind of where my head is at in all of this.
Well, thank you. I understand what you're saying.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I want to start with the minimum standards. Now, that exists as a part of the RFP process. So when the last RFP went out, those minimum standards were part of that. So that could be decided upon before the next RFP went out. Anything we wanted to, if it was appropriately agendized and so on, then we could discuss what was going to be part of that minimum standards.
Yeah, I think, and maybe just to clarify process, guidance that the council would provide to us this evening, staff would take that, go and work on preparing a draft RFP and bring that back to the council for consideration and approval. So certainly the design criteria, whatever level that may be in the preference of the council, can be included in that RFP.
Okay, and I have kind of mixed feelings about, I've lived in Scottsdale for 10 years. I'm very familiar with what patio homes around golf courses look like. And I'd be curious if there's an appetite in this community for more zoning for multifamily for R13. I know there was a lot of concern about the cottages, and I somehow remember when we were all discussing a long time ago, it seems like, Lot 350, that there was concern within the community that we were going to start having more high-density living places, more high-density developments. One in particular also was where the old hospital is, that there was concern that we might put 14 houses up there, and that would be a problem for us in Boulder City. So I said, do we know why? Was there ever a discussion with those people who you might assume would be interested in buying the property, say storybook homes, to find out what it was about the design elements or the cost, what it was about that property that it did not get the kind of action we had hoped for?
Staff at the time did reach out to several local developers to get feedback after the last RFP received no responses. There were three principal reasons that developers provided as to why they did not pursue the RFP. First was the appraisal, land value, that was determined with that initial appraisal. Second was the zoning configurations. You'll recall that with the map I showed on the screen, it was contemplating that you would have one zoning classification on one side of the street and a different zoning classification on the other side of the street. And so that plus from the market at the time, the developers didn't see R1 15 lots, so 15,000 square foot lots as being marketable. And the third was some of the design standards that were included in that RFP. That is the feedback staff had received at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that the R115 are people buying that kind of property and that size, not only home, but lot size. The other question is the discussion of having the appraisal after putting out the RFP. I have two concerns about that. One, it's sort of like the cart leading the horse, and do we then have the developers having more of an influence upon what we charge for our land? And secondly, would the appraisal be different depending on the land division, the zoning designations? I mean, if we're going to put R13s all the way around the golf course, would that have an influence on the final appraisal?
Certainly, the appraisers are going to be looking at the highest and best use for the property. And so with increased density, you're going to have the factor of the value of that increased density into consideration.
Okay, from just your sense of it, do you think that would increase or decrease the appraisal amount, having higher density houses around the golf course?
A lot of that's going to be driven by the market conditions, and the appraisers look at comps for that type of housing unit that's being proposed by the developer to determine the ultimate value.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Any others? Councilmember Folda?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so I agree with a lot of the sentiments that have been made. I feel like the minimum standards and the zoning that was previously created by previous council really narrowed the scope of who would even consider this project, and it really basically it brought it down to zero. And so I really feel like we should allow the net to be cast open a lot further, and not lose out on other opportunities that were excluded because of the options available to the previous RFP. I also think that possibly doing an RFI instead of an RFP would be should be considered, just because an RFP is a lot more formal, where an RFI could be very quick. We could really cast our net out there and see what the market's like right now, what we could narrow it down to different projects, because I agree that the 15,000 square foot lots are, I don't think, what the need in Boulder City is right now. I hear a lot of the working class is being moving over to Henderson and Las Vegas because they're being they can't afford Boulder City anymore. They're being priced out. And in the years that I've lived here, rent has gone up significantly for those who rent here. So I do think that there should be more than just one picture placed out there. And I think an RFI would be a good opportunity for us to kind of see who's interested in this project. Boulder Creek golf course, of course, is adjacent to this property, and it used to be only really high luxury homes were put around golf courses, and that's not so much the case anymore. There's all sorts of projects that have done well around golf courses. And of course, this one would just be on the perimeter. It's not throughout the golf course as our other golf courses. But I've seen everything from condos, townhouses, hotels, and just normal multifamily units. So I think really throwing the net out there and seeing what options are available would be benefit to Boulder City. I don't see what is put in place right now as really something that would get any more bids, even with the market being the way it is now.
Thank you. My thoughts on this, first off, Boulder Creek Golf Course was built probably in the most disingenuous manner that a government can go about doing a project by saying, oh, this isn't about selling land. Yeah, okay. And then you put in cutouts on the curbs for driveways and all of that. So, yeah, it was always about selling the land, and it's languished there for a decade now. It's been put up for sale before. This wasn't a request for proposals. It was essentially, here's the design, tell us if you want to build it or not. It was so restrictive that, as Mr. Mays has indicated, no one was interested in it. I think we have a major issue with the storm drain system there. Storybook Homes was not required to do any off-site improvements, which is highly unusual. So all of the storm water that's coming out of the Boulder Hills development is simply being shunted onto Bristlecone with no way of handling that water. If the flood control district is going to say that they're not interested in it, somebody's going to pay for that project. And Mr. Luttrell, any guesses on how much a project like that might cost?
Yeah, we had when the street and the storm was designed previously a few years ago, there was also an engineer's estimate put together, and that was about $950,000 for the storm on a almost $2.7 million total project.
$2.7 million total for what?
For the half-street improvements and the storm.
Okay, and that plan, I'm assuming, was probably a box culvert that would run under the other half street, is that?
No, it's most of it's reinforced concrete pipe. I was incorrectly assuming yesterday when we were talking about incorrect when I was stating that it was a large box. When I was looking at the plans this morning, it was pretty much all reinforced concrete pipe, and then even down when it's on Clubhouse, we have to go with an elliptical pipe because it's fairly shallow down there.
And at least right now, other than the roadway itself, there is no flood control in that area, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're looking at a significant amount of money to do something, because otherwise that water is just going to go down Bristlecone and come to the end there at Clubhouse Drive.
Yeah, right now at Clubhouse and Bristlecone, there's a little bit of riprap for what water does come out there. And that's actually where the design takes it, and east over to Buchanan.
Okay, and it is a quarter mile or a half mile?
Quarter mile.
Quarter mile.
You were correct when we were talking the other day.
Okay, and I'm sure that at the upper end of Bristlecone, that's too far away from the channel that runs down Buchanan, but maybe at the lower end where Country Club is a little bit closer. But I think that's a major factor that any developer is going to look at and say, well, who's going to pay for that? Is it going to be the city that pays for it, or is it going to be the developer that pays for it? And the decision was already made. Storybook paid nothing. All they do is shunt the water out onto Bristlecone, and that's the end of their responsibility right now, unless somebody decides to sue them later. But of course, we approved that, or the prior council had approved that. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the information on that, but I think that is going to be a major consideration. I think perhaps the idea of RFI might be better than an RFP at this point. The detail that was put in there was somebody's wish list on the prior release of what somebody called standards. Well, they're not standards. Is that correct, Mr. Mays? We don't have standards like that.
With respect to certain code requirements, some of that was included, and then there was additional design standards.
Okay, but the design standards are not city design standards, is that correct? I mean, there are limitations on the height of buildings. There is in the master plan a suggestion that the fronts of homes have different styles of architecture, so there's not just a whole street of sameness. But our codes do not dictate that you should have a pop out of a second story over a first story or anything like that. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what was being put into those, quote, standards were not really standards at all. It was somebody's wish list.
And typical with some RFPs, they put in architectural standards as to what the community is looking for. So yes.
Well, I won't say it's the community was looking for it. Somebody apparently was looking for it. And again, I'm just not sure that's the way to approach a project, is to tell them, it's going to look like this or that. I mean, what do we tell them it's supposed to look like? We've got a number of different architectures here in Boulder City, from the 30s, 50s, 70s. There are different types of developments here in Boulder City. So when I see that word standards on there, I'm thinking, well, that's just a misnomer. It's not a standard at all. It's what somebody or some number of people decided, oh, we want it to look like this. Well, I'm not sure that that's the correct way to approach a project like this. We would certainly have the opportunity later to say, well, we prefer this and not that. But to go out to developers and say, it has to be this way, you have to put this street here. There's something in there about there needed to be 3 clear views through the project to the golf course. I don't even know what that would be about. Any guesses?
Well, certainly that's why we're here right now, Mayor, to get feedback from the council on what exactly you would like to see in an RFP or an RFI.
And I believe there's also in there a statement about having a park, a 1.5 acre park. I know when Storybook was asked to provide a park within the Boulder Hills development, they came back with a suggestion that instead of 1 park, they would provide 3 parks that were smaller, but distributed throughout the development. But that was something that they suggested.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know. I appreciate Councilmember Hoskins bringing this forward. I'm very leery about this word standards in here. Obviously, we have building code here in Boulder City. We do have zoning classifications. Attempting to tell a developer which ones. Councilmember Folded mentioned earlier that there have been a variety of developments done that were successful. I know for the period of time I lived in the Phoenix area, I saw many of those with all different types of homes around golf courses, sometimes a mixture of homes around golf courses. So to say is standard or what's expected or, yes, I realize we do have 2 golf courses here in Boulder City, but I don't know that there's a specific requirement of what type of home has to be built on a golf course, because I've seen a wide variety around various golf courses. The idea that, oh, well, we can only have a certain size home here in Boulder City, we're probably not going to be selling an awful lot of land in the near future. So the idea that, oh no, we're only going to do these as R10s, again, I don't see the sense of that, so, well. I do see some sense in doing an RFI maybe. Mr. Mays, do you have an opinion on what we might hear back from developers if we took that approach rather than requesting proposals?
Well, certainly with the RFI route, it does encourage greater response because the developers aren't having to prepare as detailed plans, and it gives you the opportunity to have developers give you their concepts and ideas for either the entire 45 acres or a portion of it. So I think it would encourage a greater response.
Thank you. I also think, regarding the appraisals, I don't really see how you do an appraisal on land before you know what you're going to do with the land. We earlier tonight talked about a solar project. Well, there's going to be a certain value for that land if what you're doing is a solar project. If you found a gold mine on that land, you would probably wind up with a different appraisal if you said, no, we're going to use it as a gold mine. So I don't think that even considering appraisals until you have an idea of what's going to be built there, what does an appraiser do? I mean, they're just grasping at straws, I think, at that point to try and place a value on the land. So again, Councilmember Hoskins, this has been your item. I do think that Councilmember Folda's idea, that may be a starting point.
Well, I think it's a very good starting point. The reason that I brought this is because we do have some issues here. We've never been able to sell that property because we have put so many restrictions, and a developer likes to develop, and an RFI, I think, would probably be the answer. We also have some problems with the sewage, the storm sewer, and that we have to take into account because if maybe we sell it for $3 million and we spend $3 million to put the drain in, we really haven't accomplished anything, but maybe we've made that area look better.
Well, it would be once again an indication that Boulder Creek Golf Course wasn't going to make us all rich. But.
Well, that's probably true. But so the reason I brought this is because I think the council needs to weigh in on this. I think the staff needs to weigh in on it. And we all need to, we may not be able to figure this out. We may not get anything yet. But I hate to see it just die because, we were restrictive. So I would make a motion to request staff to formulate a criteria for developers to provide a design proposal for Tract 350 and bring it back to the council at our next available council meeting so we could discuss it further and see if we really want to go any further with it.
Doing it as an RFI then rather than the RFP?
If that's what Mr. Mays thinks would be the best, and I think it would be myself because it's more of it gives the developers more of a chance. And I know we want to be the one that makes the money, and we want to be trying to tell them what to do, but it's not working by telling them what to do. So let's step back, start anew, and see if we can develop something, whether it be an RFP or an RFI, and I think the RFI is better. I certainly agree with Councilwoman Folda.
Any other questions or comments?
Mayor, well, do I need a second and then I can discuss?
Well, I'm not sure we've exactly put it in the form of a motion.
Oh, I thought she was making the motion. I would just add that staff create it so that a proposal could come back with using all or part of the property. Because I think most of the time it's been discussed as using it as a 45 acre, but I just want to see if there's smaller projects that might, reach out to smaller developers to do just different smaller portions of the property.
Now, does somebody want to form a motion then?
Okay, then I will make a motion to request staff to formulate a criteria for developers to provide a design proposal, or RFI, whatever we call it, for Track 350 and be brought back to council at the next available council meeting and include other options that may be necessary in order to get this property sold.
I'll second.
Did you want to offer a friendly amendment to clarify that?
Sure. I would amend the motion to include that the proposal may use all or part of the property.
I accept the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous then. Again, Councilmember Hoskins, I appreciate you bringing that forward. It seems like it shouldn't take 10 years to sell a piece of land in Boulder City, but maybe we can cure that. Brings us to item number 9, recruitment process for the permanent city manager and city attorney positions. Mr. Bolt.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryce Bolt, Administrative Services Director. Yeah, before you this evening, an item where we're asking that you choose an executive recruitment firm to fill the vacancies of the acting or the city manager and the city attorney. And the second item would be to determine what 2 council members you'd like to liaison with chosen firm. If there's any questions I can answer.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. Could I request maybe you highlight, go through each of the different firms and kind of highlight them so we can kind of go over their pros and cons a little bit. There were some price differences, and I just kind of wanted to go through those if we could.
I don't have each proposal with me, I'm sorry. I hope to have it electronically.
Sorry, I put you on the spot a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first proposal within our packet here is the government HR. That is one that this city hasn't used, and I personally haven't used in my career either. But if you wanted to if you wanted to look at the price, I mean, every proposal has some uniqueness to it. To include prices where they either include their travel and expenses or they don't, that would be extra. Most of them don't include, for instance, if we want to bring candidates in, which you may or may not want to with the COVID. But their times are about the same. And their costs, HR is, excuse me, lower. Sorry, I'm trying to get this right where I can see it. Now I just lost it. I'm sorry, perhaps I could just answer specific questions relative to those proposals. I'm sorry, Michael, I've lost it completely here. So if we want to look at GovAZ, they're coming in at both recruitments at about 40,000, and then they'd have also their fees of any travel or other expenses they have. I again haven't used them, and I'm not sure exactly the details of some of their services, but they provide a similar product to the other proposals, at least with respect to the advertising, how they'll get the word out, Their flyers that they produce, very similar too. Management partners, we have utilized them, not for recruitment, but we use them for the strategic plan. We use them for an interim fire chief placement. And we use them for department evaluation. And again, their timeframes are very similar, and their costs is similar to CPS, or CPS, yes.
Mm-hmm.
CPS I've used only for testing material. I haven't used them for recruitment ever before. They're very well known in California. They talk about where they're going to advertise, so advertising is very similar. Their time frame is very similar. And their dollars are within $7,000. Bob Murray and Associates, we have utilized them for recruitments, the previous city manager recruitment, the fire chief recruitment, and the public works recruitment, and the utilities recruitment. Their time frame is very similar, and I believe their costs were similar also. They break out their expenses or what they believe their expenses might be. And those are the four that submitted proposals.
Okay, so were you able to kind of go through and weigh, I know you did some recommendations on here based on previous work that they've done for the city, but as far as, you know, it looks like some do and have different fees depending on how much work they do. So they have kind of a smaller package and then a larger, more, I want to say, things like their background checks and things like that get more intense with the bigger projects. So were you, as in, you be able, were able to look through these and kind of weigh what those were? I just saw, like, on page 608 of the packet, and I'm not sure if I read this right, that Bob Murray was quoting $24,000, which is a bit less than all that, and I'm not sure if that's per recruitment or if that was the total services.
Well, on what page? Oh, that one there. So that's really just their fees and reimbursable expenses, what they anticipate it could be. Their flat services that would be for one recruitment. Okay. Both recruitments would take us to about 50. Yeah. Okay. And then with respect to, you know, they itemize those things, and certainly it's up to the council. The brochure and the advertising, background checks, we could do those through some other vendor if the council so chose. And then they also do negotiations of contract, whether that's not in here as an itemized, but it's whatever the council, when we get to that point, they can make decisions about whether we do background checks. The background checks, we have to have them fingerprinted, and we have to run through a background.
And so would any of these different groups be willing to, you know, like, do part of it? So if we reused, like, our brochure design printing, I'm not sure, do we have copyright on that, or do we have something like that, or was that from the previous group that made those? Is that something that we could reuse or no?
Well, and it could be. It certainly could. And when I've utilized them for the director recruitments, we've gone as kind of an abbreviated recruitment. So we'll produce the brochure, they'll distribute it throughout their network, and then we can, in those, for instance, they did the advertising, and then through their contacts, vetted the applicants and presented the city with about 5 or 6 viable candidates. And then really we took it from there. We did the interviews and backgrounds and everything else. That was kind of a hybrid, if you will, with an internal, external. But with regard to the brochures, they prefer to produce their own. And I would say, since Nancy Summer, I'm not sure if we have the skill set here anymore to produce such beautiful brochures. She could rival theirs with respect to.
Okay. So I guess my only other comments was, there's kind of a, I guess it comes down to personal preference of what the council's looking for. What I liked about one of them was that as far as their background, I saw that there was a big change in the way that the different companies handled the background checks. Some were just basically like a Google search that looks at public records, and maybe, financial credit check. I think it was Bob Murray who would actually talk with people who worked with the candidate. And I think that's important to do. I don't know that that was done previously or not, but I believe previously we backed off on some of the background checks. Mm-hmm. Is that right, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it would be good. This as far as the scope of recruiting, it's going to be a little bit more limited for the city attorney because they have to have passed the Nevada bar, and so typically they would be either in Nevada or once lived in Nevada and have still maybe a current license. So, but as a city manager, that scope could go a lot further. But I think it is important to talk with their previous work or coworkers, because sometimes you get an applicant that might be making a move because he's about to be pushed out or she's about to be pushed out, versus looking for a better opportunity and enjoys and wants to make home of Boulder City. So that's just my thoughts on this.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, actually Bob Murray was the one that looked most attractive to me. One of the things I was looking for was just whether the literature that they put together for us caught my eye. Some of it was very busy. I really liked that. However, I noticed one of them, and I can't remember, said that they were putting together samples for similar size and scope, and then included Sacramento County. And I thought, I'm not sure they really understand the size of Boulder City, but when I went through Bob Murray, that it looked like they had worked with cities that were small, that they were familiar with, Grass Valley, California, not necessarily the same size, but when they put together the list of comparable scope projects, it seemed like they were aware of who we are and, and the fact that we had done business with them before. But like I said, reading through all of it and the prices were about the same, and how they go about doing it, I was most impressed with Bob Murray.
Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, thank you. The GovHR, I was impressed with the statistics that they had that since 2009 they have conducted more than 700 recruitments in 38 states and a 28% repeated business with 94% satisfaction. And the scope, full scope recruitment is at 47,000 if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. And the limited scope is at 40,000. The management partners, I believe that cost is 54,900.
Yes.
And the CPS HR, the cost is 47,000, and the Bob Murray is 48,800. So I would recommend the GovHR using the full scope of recruitment. But I think they all had good presentations, but I was more impressed with them.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I too, after going through all of these, they are obviously very similar. They all offer a very similar type of service. But I too, with GHR, was the one that I was drawn most to at the end. And I think what kind of for me put them over was also the background of the Charlene Stevens and Sarah McKee with that company, who had extensive background themselves as city managers, as city administrators, public works directors. They have that experience themselves. I don't know if they themselves are the ones doing the hiring, but it shows that they are people with an incredible amount. Again, everybody offers a very similar service, so this is just the one that happened to stand out to me, and that was the thing that caught my eye. That's really all I have to say.
I also felt that the information for the GovHR was more complete. They give you a guarantee that if the selected candidate doesn't work out for whatever reason, either at the employer or the employee's initiation, they will go through the process again at only the cost of advertising. Bob Murray, I was on council when we worked with Bob Murray. I did find the company to be very professional. However, something went wrong in the process, and I'm not indicating that was the problem with that firm, but I was not pleased with the way the process ended up. Again, I did feel that they were very professional in the way that they worked, but I found issues with how the process overall worked out the last time around. The other two companies, again, they all do this. Matter of fact, Management Partners did our strategic plan. So they handle a variety of consulting type of services. The one other company, they also do training and various other functions, but I was more impressed with the GovHR presentation in here and the way that they guarantee that they will provide a candidate who is viable for at least a year period of time. Any other questions or comments? Well, I would move to select GovHR then as our recruiting firm.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed to GovHR as the recruiting firm? All right, that's unanimous decision then. And I guess as part of this also, we're going to name two council members as the liaisons for this company. Again, these positions are appointed officials who report directly to the city council. I think it's important that the city council then be the ones that are managing the process. I don't believe that the way this was done previously, where certain decisions were being made on accepting or rejecting resumes, I don't believe that's the role, the proper role for two members of council to take that on. I think that the council, all members of the council, should have the opportunity to review any and all of the resumes that may come in. So I think that's significant. I have been through the process myself, and I believe that I would be effective in doing that. Is there anyone else that is interested in the doing the liaison work? Councilmember Bridges? Anyone else? Councilmember Adams? Councilmember Folda? Okay then, anyone wishing to defer to another council member?
Well, Mayor, I just wanted to speak real briefly in that I have been working as a member of the Board of Health. We have been going through this process in searching for a new district health officer, and while I myself don't serve on the committee for the succession committee, I have been observing it, reviewing it. I have been involved in those discussions. They oftentimes, they've basically, from the very beginning, from what this is going to look like all the way to the end, and then those discussions do come to us. So I just wanted to say that I know contrary to what I had previously said, that I didn't have the time. I have had the fortunate circumstances have changed where I do have time. I don't intend to nominate myself. I'm not asking anyone to, but I just wanted to make it clear that should the experience that I have going through that, if anybody thinks that that would be of benefit to the city, that I would accept that. But I just wanted to make that statement out there that it is a process that I have been going through, and if that's beneficial, I would be willing to help in that way.
Well, I understand, but as always, we have to make decisions, so.
I understand.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is put some of my past experience to good use. As a prior academic, I sat on hiring committees, retention, tenure, and promotion committees. I have in my professional life probably spoken with and gone through the entire process with and interviewed and made decisions on 100 candidates for faculty positions and staff positions at the university. I think it's an area where I would bring a strength to walk through that process and be a representative of council.
Councilmember Folda?
Just for further discussion before just trying to speak for myself, the purpose of this liaison would be to be able to provide information and receive information from this firm, I believe, and it's not for the purpose of reducing the candidates or making decision on the final candidate. So I just want to make sure that that's understood what that position is. That will, I would hope the process would be that it came back to all of council to make those determinations. So that's just kind of where I am with that one. As I've been going through this for the last several months to get the agenda item to work on getting to this point where we could select new people. I feel like I have a lot of background in this and what we want and don't want, and so that's kind of why I'd like to be on this, be a liaison. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree with you that that's what this process is about, is understanding the process for appointing or removing officials. It's not so much, all of the council members will be involved as far as evaluating candidates go. So your point is well taken for me, that's not what, we're not doing selections with this liaison. We are simply working with the company as far as what the requirements for appointed officials are here in Boulder City. So again, anyone wishing to defer? All right, we will then take it one at a time. We can start with myself. I would caution everybody, you have one vote here. So I don't believe we're going to get anywhere if we have people voting for multiple members of the council. True, but you can vote, yes, you can vote for each person. Yes, there are two candidates. You are correct. Okay, all those in favor of myself being on this liaison? Okay, that's 4-1. Alphabetically, we'll go with Councilmember Bridges then. All those in favor of Councilmember Bridges being on the committee? Okay, that's one vote. I'm sorry, James. I guess I can't figure out A comes before B.
No worries, Mayor.
Councilmember Adams, all those in favor of Councilmember Adams being on the committee? All right, no votes there. All those in favor of Councilmember Folda being on the committee? And that's also 4-1. So those will be the two liaisons. We have selected the GovHR. Mr. Bolt, I will rely on you to tell us what our next steps are, or Mr. City Manager. probably some type of brief meeting, I guess, to.
Right, I'll contact GovHR in the morning and give them your contact information and facilitate that in any way. But they can contact you directly, and again, I can facilitate that contact and then any logistics they might have coming on site or anything like that.
And we're all used to lots of video conferencing now, so Mr. City Manager, any other direction that you'd like to offer?
Certainly, if it is the council's desire, the next step could be to bring GovHR here and to present to the council and discuss how to move forward with the process.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments, issues that we need to discuss with regard to this then? All right, then we will move on to item number 10, discussion and possible staff direction regarding potential ballot questions. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, the council has the ability to put ballot questions on any general election ballot. Our last municipal election will take place in June 2021, prior to the city transitioning to even-numbered years. So the requirements for the ballot questions are what Boulder City can put forth to the voters is any land sales over an acre, any expenditures from the capital improvement fund, charter amendments have to go twice, and any debt incurred over $1 million. So at the in the October municipal ad hoc pool committee, they had made a recommendation to council to move forward the 3 questions that had been drafted earlier in the year but did not go forward just because of the uncertainty with the costs of the pool. Those questions were included in your packet. They are 2 capital improvement fund expenditure questions. One is an annual transfer of $1 million to a pool reserve and for the purpose of establishing funds for the construction of an aquatic center. One is for $7 million to startup money. And then the other question is to reformulate the proceeds from the sale of tract 350. Staff does not have any other recommendations at this time besides those, so you can certainly bring forth any questions that you would like to see on the ballot. And at this time, the direction would be, if you want to move forward with the 3 that were recommended by the pool, to direct the city attorney to draft those. And I think the other recommendation by the pool was to clarify some language on the land sale proceeds. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Why don't we start then with those 3 questions? Any questions or comments regarding the 3 questions listed in the packet regarding the pool project? Councilmember Folda?
Yes, so as I'm not on that committee and I haven't really followed too closely besides what reports we get in council, with the recent vote of council to have more detailed look at the pool and what its needs are, how would that fall in place or change the scale of these questions, or what cost might happen, or what the project scope may be?
You know, I could just say both Councilmember Adams and I are on that committee. Unfortunately, we don't know. You know, the committee did not meet for a period of time for a few months because of the COVID conditions. I think what we have come to is we need to kind of do this in parallel. So we need to prepare the ballot questions at the same time we're trying to get the costs of the project. Madam City Clerk, what is our final date to approve the ballot questions?
I have to have the full questions, including arguments and rebuttals, to the Clark County Registrar 60 days in advance, so that would be 4/15, but that would be the very last drop dead date.
Okay, so we're looking probably more realistically end of February, beginning of March?
I'd say, beginning of April is what I put on the proposed timeline, but of course, the earlier the better. But yeah, it's a condensed process during a municipal election versus a state or county election. The time frame is much more condensed.
Right. And I know at the last meeting, one of the other members was familiar with a company who did a lot of work for the hotels in Vegas. I think that company has already come out and taken a look at the existing pool. Council had already approved payment for a professional evaluation. And again, I believe we're probably not going to see those at the next pool committee meeting, but probably or hopefully the December or January. And then we should be able to, again, hopefully get an idea, but I'll give you my feeling on it. If we don't have a fairly solid figure by the time the ballot questions are done, I'm not willing to ask the public to do something that we can't give them a fairly solid figure on. Councilmember Adams?
No, I think you covered just about all of it. I think kind of one of the things we are up against a time thing here, and whether that's the fact that we're going to be moving away from municipal elections to general elections, or the fact that the pool isn't long for this world, unfortunately. I mean, hopefully we can extend that. And I think in the end, we need to make sure that there is money there, whether we're going to be building a new pool or whether we're going to be, looking to repair it. Those are discussions that we're having. I think it's probably safe to say that it might not be that wise to move forward should we not be able to kind of finalize and give the residents a more concrete idea of what it is that we're talking about. I think that was a little bit part of the problem with the last go around. So I think other than that, the mayor covered it all pretty much. I think at least starting this, because time is kind of the essence with regards to when we'll be able to do this again. And I think, if we can provide some more information to the residents, having them, voice their opinion once more and how we might be able to get our pool up in shape.
I do think too that, by the time the project is actually ready to start, break ground, we're probably still looking at a couple of years down the road. So I think that would allow for, if the costs were to get out of control or well beyond what we think they might be now, the residents, the citizens can let us know that, and if there's not enough money there, they're probably not going to give us any more. So
that is, unless you're an ice rink or a sports, there you go. Then you're going to be shovel ready before the project's approved.
and we do have a very generous benefactor who donated $1.3 million, so that money is designated for the pool, and it is sitting in the account. So.
Okay, and then the other question I had, as far as the land management process, I don't think this really, would the schedule allow for if, when I think it's February, correct, when we will discuss the land management process and properties added to that, would this time frame allow for any other adjustments if we do decide to move forward with a sale or land that would need to be voted on?
Well, I think that to answer your question with respect to the land management process, the code says that we have to bring back before the council before February 15th the Planning Commission's recommendation. And so I think, and I'll have the city clerk clarify, you'd be looking to give guidance now on any type of land issue so that could be worked on by the city attorney. And so by February 15th, it would be too late to initiate that.
Okay. So yeah, that's just what my question was for applicants that are applying now for possible purchases of property that are over an acre. They would have to wait to the next election cycle for any kind of ballot question to approve that sale.
Correct.
Okay. So staff is kind of hopefully letting them know that there is that time frame that we are bound to with the election cycle.
Correct. Indicating that would be a multi-year process to facilitate that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on these three questions? Again, I had expressed the concern at the pool committee meeting, that I would like to have a review by the city attorney, especially in regard to the use of the land sale if Tract 350 does sell. In my mind, there's a difference between the debt that currently exists, which is for the raw water line, and taking on new debt and saying that 2010 ballot question would be sufficient to apply that money to this. And again, this question does modify that, but I think that it needs some clarification so that the public understands what is being asked, that the 2010 ballot question was to retire debt that existed at that time. And again, I don't recall all that was there, but there was more debt than just the raw water line at that point. The golf course itself, thank you, Madam City Clerk. So again, I think that's a question that needs to be answered so that we don't see a conflict between the 2010 question and whatever we might propose this year. Any other questions or comments on the pool questions? Okay, does anyone have any other questions that they would like to consider? I have one. There's been talk of having a franchise fee implemented with regard to our utility system. I see no sense whatsoever in doing that. We're simply, by doing so, asking our residents to pay a fee in their utility bill for the use of city land that the utilities have occupied since they were constructed, and then transfer that money into the general fund. For the life of me, I can't understand how that would benefit any resident whatsoever. So I would propose a ballot question that no fee for the use of city-owned property or facilities will ever be charged to an entity of the city of Boulder City, including the municipal utility system. And again, I'm sure we can work on the wording of that. But as long as the utility system remains the property of the city of Boulder City, I would not want to see a franchise fee, and I believe that's something that should go to the voters to get their statement of whether they would want to charge themselves a fee like that or not.
So you're proposing an advisory question?
I guess it would need to be an advisory question. Obviously, it's not a charter amendment to do something like that, but we could do an ordinance like that, couldn't we?
You can always do an ordinance. You can do an ordinance, but that wouldn't require a ballot question. You could, it's just a...
Well, there are ordinances that can be done by ballot question. Is that correct?
Well, that's with the initiative petition process. Anytime there's an initiative petition, it would come before you, it would be voter initiated. It would come before the council, and you would decide if you want to adopt it or not. And if you chose not to, then it would go on the ballot. However, you always have the opportunity to, if the voters initiated a petition to adopt the ordinance as the voters requested, and then the process stops. So you can, enact legislation. You're the governing body, But if you wanted to just ask an advisory question to the citizens, if they were in favor of that, I will just tell you that is of course you can do that, but it's a very expensive way to determine if that's something that they would want.
Well, we're going to be doing ballot questions anyway, so there will be a voter guide that gets printed, and yes, this could take up another 2, 3, 4 pages within that guide. I just, I think it's a very important issue for the residents to decide upon. And it would have far-reaching consequences should something like that happen. And it is one of the recommendations coming forward in the rate study that's currently underway. Any other thoughts on Madam City Attorney?
I would just say that yes, the council has the option here to present that ballot question, and I agree that it would be an advisory question. Advisory questions are not binding, and what that means is that they don't require the council to take an action, but so in other words, should the council propose such a ballot question and that question be presented to the voters, it wouldn't be binding as in that it would impose the prohibition you seek to impose, but it would gauge voter opinion on whether the council should seek such a prohibition, which is currently within the council's discretion to seek by ordinance.
Well, and thank you for that information. I do think it's important for the residents to speak out on an issue like that. I suspect I know what the answer from them would be, and I think it's important to judge exactly how much opposition to such a fee we would see from the residents, because the way it's being phrased within the rate study is to be a recommendation that we go forward with that. So I believe it's worthwhile gauging the public's standing on that particular issue. Any other thoughts on it?
I'm more visual, so I'd have to read it, but I didn't know if the wording, maybe it needs to be ironed out a little bit more.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Okay. I'm sure it needs to be improved.
Just because you want to be able to use taxpayer money towards city uses, as far as land, we use tax money for all sorts of city-owned properties, for our parks and our buildings and, general fund issues. So you wouldn't want to limit the scope of what money could be used for all land, but specifically what, a franchise tax type of
Well, and
use.
again, what the franchise fee is, it's very specific, and we do charge franchise fees to CenturyLink, Cox Communications, because they're private companies utilizing city land. What this franchise fee that is being discussed in the rate study is that essentially a city-owned municipal utility would begin charging the ratepayers, the residents, with that money, with that franchise fee then going into the general fund. I just don't see how that could ever benefit the residents, charging them on their utility bill for something. Be honest about, if we need that money in the general fund, I think any council should be honest and go to the residents and say, we need more money from you. We're going to do some type of tax increase, whether it be a property tax or sales tax or some other type of tax. But to call it a franchise fee when, these utilities have been here for decades, they're owned by the residents already, and to say, well, we're going to basically charge you for using your own land, and then we're going to go use that money for something else. You know, the utility fund itself, if money is needed in there, you know, that's where the rates come in. The rates can move up and down on the needs of the utility department.
Yeah, and I agree to the point. I just would want the verbiage to not back us into some, unintended corner.
Well, and again, it is an ordinance, so it's not a charter amendment. You know, it might result in an ordinance, I should say that. So it would not be a charter amendment. It could be reversed if, you know, things were to change drastically.
Yeah, and I agree that although this could be just simply done as ordinance, I do think that it would be good to have the outreach of the community for any, 20 years from now or whatever the council says, well, this is what the residents were thinking and this is why we did things the way we did. I think that's helpful to get that, because we look at the same thing, what residents chose to do on ballot questions, and we refer to that and acknowledge and apply current based on that. So I agree with that intent.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, you know, there was a ballot question about whether we should allow ATVs or OHVs, you know, off-road vehicles on the streets. You know, that could have also been done by ordinance, and the residents, a majority of the residents said they did not want to see that type of activity, so. Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, this was also an issue with me when we had the meeting and they talked about it and they said, well, they have it in Henderson and they can have it in Henderson. I don't think we should have it here.
Any other comments regarding this particular question? And yes, we can certainly ask the city attorney to do a much better job of framing the question than I did. All right, any other questions that anyone wants to discuss? All right, then. Anything further, Madam City Clerk, that you need?
Yeah, I would like a formal motion, Mayor,
Okay.
for those four. I don't know if you want to do them separately or all together, but the action would be to direct the city attorney to prepare the questions and bring them back for council's consideration.
Okay, I'll make a motion then. The three questions that are contained within the packet regarding the municipal pool repair or replacement listed on page 634 of the packet refer to the city attorney for review of the wording in general, and specifically for comparison to the 2010 ballot question regarding the debt payment. So I will make that one motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then the second motion will be for an advisory question regarding the implementation of a franchise fee. Also to be referred to the city attorney for proper wording. Sufficient? Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, anything else on that item then? All right, thank you. That brings us to item number 11, the CARES Act funding for the airport. Mr. Bolt.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryce Bolt, Administrative Services Director. There's the discussion of possible staff director regarding the CARES money received by the Boulder City Municipal Airport. We put his related information in the report, the attachments, and the presentation that Diane will do right now, and afterwards will be stand ready to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Pelletier?
Diane Pelletier, Boulder City Finance Director. Okay, get myself organized here. This is a short presentation, but I thought it would be beneficial to see how we got where we are. Okay. So I'm going to take you back in time to April 22nd of this year, which feels like it was 100 years ago. But that was a budget meeting, and it was kind of in the middle of the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And everybody was kind of really, I won't use the word panicking, but really didn't know what was going to happen. So during that April 22nd budget meeting, we had to pretty much redo the entire budget. And based on assumptions that we received from a firm that was employed by Nevada to come up with estimates on what would happen to the city's revenues. So during that meeting, we had significant projected revenue losses due to COVID-19, and in particular, we had projected commercial ground lease loss of over $400,000, and total projected fiscal year 21 loss of $743,266. So that would be this year's current projected loss. And during that meeting, we also had knowledge that CARES Act had been granted to assist airports nationally, and that Boulder City was included in that CARES Act funding. So the city was told that they were going to receive $2.695 million, $912 to be used for airport operations. And one of the important criteria to use that money was we had to keep the staff employed. We had to keep at least 90% of staff on the payroll. So CARES Act funding for the airport, the FAA CARES Act funding, is eligible. It was eligible to be used for reimbursements of airport expenses after January 20th, 2020. And the period of performance for the CARES Act grant is 4 years. So we have that $2.695 million and have 4 years in order to draw down on that money to get reimbursed for our expenditures. And these reimbursements are lawful for airport operation and maintenance expenses. I guess if we needed to try to use stuff for capital, it would require us to go back to FAA and submit a new application, which could take several years to process. And we have a 4-year window on this, and it would be not advisable to do that since we have other ways to accumulate revenues to use towards capital. And again, I want to just stress, we have to keep 90% of employees at the airport to get this funding. So to date, as of September 30th, there have been 3 reimbursements for operating costs totaling $638,668. So again, this $2.6 million has not been given to the city. We have to apply for it by submitting operating costs. And the breakdown of that is salaries, $327,000, and the rest is general operations, which is maintenance for the airfield, grounds, vehicle, operational, communications, insurance, professional services, utilities, office supplies, and subscriptions. So a few words about revenues to try to get some perspective of how the airport revenues are indeed doing. So we just closed out June 30th, and we're in the middle of preparing the financials and the audits being done. And on the actual airport operation revenues were budgeted to be $803,000 for the fiscal year that ended on June 30, 2020. And the actual amount received for the year was $801,000, which really is not bad at all, considering the last quarter of the year. We pretty much were shut down. But because the airport had higher than budgeted revenues in the first 3 quarters, it kind of carried that final quarter. So the 2020 year ending June 30th, total revenues for the airport was not majorly impacted by COVID, even though you would have thought it would have been, but because they'd done well the first 3 quarters, it kind of made up for that. So the operating revenues for the current year budget is, we've reduced that based on those projections that we received from I can't think of the name of the firm that provided the projections for the state. That got reduced to $180,000. So from a $800,000 budget projected revenues in the year ended, this year has $180,000 in the budget, and we've received $135,000 as of October of 2020. So that's significantly less than the way the airport had been operating. So the airport is projected to return to pre-COVID-19 revenue levels sometime in fiscal year 2025. We think it's going to be a slow process to get back up to that $800,000 a year. So once again, annual airport operating expenses are approximately $800,000. So the CARES Act's money is being budgeted, I guess, to be drawn down over that 4-year period, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID-19. We don't know if we're going to have another shutdown. We don't know for sure whether we're going to be out of this by that point. So we have to maintain airport operations, and to do so, we have this source of funding that we can use over that 4-year period. So this is where we're supposed to use it and where we plan on using it, and that's why we want to stretch that money over the 4-year period to ensure that the airport can remain operational. So if CARES funding was used for 4 years for operating costs and revenues start going up, it would ensure that the airport remains operational and maintains a healthy fund balance, because even if revenues start going up and we're still using the CARES Act money, which is what it's for, to maintain operations, that extra revenue will get added to the fund balance. And so it'll help the airport maintain a healthy fund balance that will allow projects to be done with our fund balance, not the CARES money, with our fund balance, and we could move forward on some projects. And I guess the fuel storage facility upgrade would be one that is desirable to be tackled at some point in the future. So basically that would be how we would get money for that project. So here's some conclusions. Future continues to be uncertain due to COVID-19. The airport should continue using CARES funding for operational costs as authorized by the CARES Act. And future capital needs should be addressed with fund balance and incoming revenues. So I think that brings us to the current time. And I know there's Bryce is here and Willie is here from the airport to answer more technical questions, but I'll be happy to try to help answer financial questions.
Questions or comments from council? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, thank you very much. I always appreciate your presentations of the finances and break it down and make it very easy to wrap my head around. I did want to confirm something. This last item that you brought up, using the money for non-FAA funded, and it's also addressing a comment that was made earlier about the fuel tanks and the fuel farm and doing any work with that. On page 13, on the questions on, questions on the use of funds. It said question U14, can they be used to reimburse for a cost associated with an aeronautical service or product provided by the airport sponsor? And it looks like that's the reason why we can't use the money for the fuel farm or fuel tanks or to upgrade or anything, because You have to certify it is the only provider of the same product or service at the airport. Correct?
I don't have all those rules in my head, so I would have to read what you're talking about, and I probably would agree with you, but I don't know for sure, but.
Okay, I know that was brought up as an issue, and it was also
Okay.
mentioned on the documentation of using it for that, and when I was reading all the questions, I thought, well, that's interesting that.
And my understanding is the fuel farm has never been eligible to use FAA funds, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. The fuel farm is a revenue-generating capital expense, and the FAA won't fund those types of capital projects unless we have a really good reason why we have to do it, and all of our other projects are already accomplished. And then we don't get any FAA airport improvement funds or non-primary entitlement funds for the following 3 to 5 years. So we simply can't use the FAA money for that.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it came up, like I said, a couple of times as questions, and I just wanted to make sure there was an answer to that.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Williams, while we're on that subject, though, there are other maintenance and capital improvement costs that this money will pay for under the program, the CARES Act program. Is that correct?
No, this is for operations and maintenance costs. Those.
Hold on. Let me find the reference here. It's stated several times throughout the FAQ that is included in the packet that these funds are available, not the funds that an application has been placed for, but the funds that were made available through the CARES Act for airports. Capital and maintenance projects are eligible for reimbursement under this program.
That gets a little bit, there's a couple of mixes here. So whenever we applied for the CARES grant, there were a couple of options. We could either get the CARES grant for operations and maintenance, or we could go through the CIP routine and use the money for a capital improvement. To do that, we already have money available for FAA authorized capital improvements, that being maintenance of the runways and lighting and that type of thing. So it's not a good idea that money gets turned over. The non-primary entitlement money gets turned over every 3 years. If you don't use it within 3 years, you lose it. So if we put $2.7 million into capital projects where we've already got money available, and the timing wasn't right to do that, then we would end up possibly losing, primary entitlement money. So that's why we're doing it the way we're doing it right now, which is to support the airport operations and maintenance, and that frees up any revenues that we do have to be applied to capital improvements that the FAA does not fund.
Let's say things get a lot better as far as loss of revenue in 18 months. Let's say they go back almost to normal. So how do we then go to the FAA and say, well, we need money for operations?
It's easy. They've already authorized it. So we continue to send in invoices like we have been doing, and we continue to get them until we reach the maximum amount of this grant.
And you don't think at any point over the next 4 years that the FAA may go, you know what, you don't need support for your operations anymore because you're not being impacted any longer. So we're going to stop that.
That's something that we'd have to talk to the FAA about, but I don't believe that's a concern, at least present day concern. The government can change their mind on stuff, but I think it would be,
that?
huh?
You've noticed that? That does happen.
It does happen.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah, I know, but from what I read and from the grant application process and everything, this has been the absolute simplest and most defined grant I've ever applied for.
Okay, one reference, and again, when I read through this, I found many references to this, but this is on page 655 of the packet. Question GA6, how long do the grant assurances remain in effect for a CARES Act airport grant agreement for an airport's operational and maintenance expenses or debt services? The grant assurances remain in effect for 4 years. And so it says operational and maintenance. So you're saying we have already submitted an application that only applied for operational expenses with the projection that over 4 years it would use up the nearly $2.7 million allocation for the airport, and so no other consideration needs to be given to anything. We've found a way to use all of the money that was allocated for the Boulder City Airport, and let's not consider anything else.
There wasn't a choice of mixing the grant programs. So it was either we could do operations and maintenance, or we would have to do a totally separate grant application and do that with for capital improvements. And again, like I said, we've got money coming that's available from the FAA for capital improvements that are FAA eligible.
But that was pre-COVID, that right? I mean, it has
no. That's what we have. We have non-primary entitlement funds. They keep it, I would like to say in a bank for us, but they're primary entitlement funds that they've allocated to this airport already, and we continue to pick up those allocated funds continuing on. And then beyond the allocated non-primary entitlement funds, there's also airport improvement funds, which are a competitive grant process. But we're eligible to compete for those really large projects.
Okay, but what I'm getting at is those other programs really have no impact on the CARES Act money.
That is correct.
Okay, so two separate issues.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's also part of the CARES Act relates to a state block grant program. Apparently the state of Nevada also received an allocation under the CARES Act regarding aviation specific purposes.
Yes, I understand that they did. I don't know a whole lot about that, and I haven't seen much information on it. I know that they received some money. I don't know what happened to it.
Well, at least from what was provided in the packet, it looks like it didn't specify what Nevada received, but it specified what the allotment in the CARES Act was, and it's a substantial amount of money.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just hoping we're not overlooking something. It seems we've put all our eggs into one basket. We've just said, they said we could get 2.7 million. One of the purposes you can use it for is operational expenses. So a grant application was filled out for that, and it's assumed that over a 4-year period of time, we will use that money up.
Yes, sir. I can look into the state grant funding and where that money is being allocated.
Yeah, it's called the State Block Grant Program.
Yes.
Okay. Again.
I just don't have that information with me.
Yeah, and it was a mention within the materials in the packet, but it wasn't a significant mention, but it does appear that the state of Nevada received that, and the intent looks to be for general aviation airports. And is that what our airport is considered as a general aviation? Because they give some other categories, commercial use, primary use.
Yes, we're kind of in the middle there. We're a small commercial. It's general aviation, so it's kind of a misnomer. You've got commercial aviation, which is like McCarran, then you've got public aviation, which is your military, and then everything else is general aviation. But we step up a notch higher because of the number of employments and the commercial operations we have on the airport, which also gets us a higher amount of non-primary entitlement funding.
Yeah, you're referring to the tour companies and the helicopter and
yes, sir,
plane tours. All right. My concern is that also for those tour operators out there, they're the ones who have suffered the revenue loss. And again, I guess this would be a question for Ms. Pelletier. Exactly how much money within the current fiscal year is projected to be lost, and what is the loss? In other words, what money were we getting before that we are not getting now?
So you're referring to the FBOs, which there
No,
are two?
looking at the slides that you have, there's a figure in there of like $800,000 loss and potential revenue. What were we getting? Let's say, what did we get last fiscal year?
The fiscal year 21, this current year, projected loss at the time we did the budget last April, $743,000.
Okay, but what's our actual loss? If we look at it, and I realize we're less than halfway through this current fiscal year, but if we looked at the same point in the last fiscal year, what's our actual loss been?
Well, we're probably down, I would say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100,000 right now, for like the first quarter, I would say. But I don't have specifics. I'll have more information as time goes on. But just, on the CARES Act money, that is what that program is for airport operations. And
well, it's for more than that. That was the decision that was made here, but it's
which
for
was a
more
smart
than that.
decision, though, because that is probably the largest question mark for the airport. And we don't know. It was projected at the time all this was going on that it would take till 2025 to get the airport back up to normal. So when you're faced with decisions you're making based on the information you have at the time,
I understand.
That was the right thing for the city to do.
Yeah, we've been working through the process. I don't know that it was ever explained about what's happening there with the airport and this particular part of the CARES Act money. And I understand when we talk about CARES Act, it was a more than 2,000-page bill. It had many different sections in it. So there was some that applied to aviation. There was some that applied to the other money that was finally received from Clark County. There's all kinds of different things within that bill. But what I'm discussing is the money that was designated for the airport. There appears to be allowed under the program the use of that money for things other than operations. In other words, salaries of employees.
That's what we're using it for salaries and for operations.
Okay. So what I would like to find out is how much revenue has actually been lost up until this point in time.
Well, the budgeted revenues this year were decreased from 803,000 to 180,000 for the entire year.
Right, I understand
And we've gotten
that, but I'm not asking,
135,000 as of October.
And I do understand when Applied Analytics came in,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they were being very conservative with those initial estimates.
Yep.
Ranging up to 45, 50%, sometimes even higher,
Mm-hmm.
as far as reductions in revenue.
I think the city used basically a 40% reduction,
Yeah.
if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and it
a
depends
lot of
on your
budgets we're
revenue
working on.
source, right. It depends on the revenue source that you were dependent on.
Mm-hmm.
But those projections have been dialed back and the actuals have been dialed back.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we're several months into this, rather than projecting ahead, I would like to see where we're at now in actual terms.
Well, I've given you that information based on what the budget is this year. The budget this year is projecting $180,000 of revenues for the entire year, based on what we were working with in April.
Okay.
As of right now,
All right.
we have received $135,000, which to me tells me we're on track to exceed the $180,000 for the year. But then again, I don't know what's going to happen.
I'll submit,
You know.
and I do understand that none of us know. You know, we're
Mhm.
seeing this thing go in the wrong direction.
Right.
I'll submit a memo to the city manager asking for the information in as detailed of a format as I possibly can.
You can do that.
Councilmember Folda?
Thank you, Mayor, just real fast, because that was my question as well. If I could add on to that or piggyback onto that to say, ask, what is the actual revenue loss? Where is that falling? Is that heavily on rent that we're not seeing, or lease space, or is that fuel charges? So where is that loss of revenue actually coming from? If we could add that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be happy to do so. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I did have, I think it's an issue of terminology for me, in terms of the word maintenance, operations and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So if there needs to be part of the ramp or the apron that needs to be repaved, that is considered maintenance, correct? No, it is not?
No, that would be a capital. Depends on the cost. The cost drives, the cost and the life expectancy of the repair would
Okay.
determine whether it's capital or maintenance.
So is there any maintenance of buildings, equipment, anything like that, that is covered under the CARES fund?
The operating maintenance. So, you know, not the big ticket like fuel tank type
No, I know,
projects. It
but
would be,
if there was a crack in the runway and it needed to be repaired,
that would be covered.
that would be considered, it would be routine maintenance
Mhm.
of the ongoing business as opposed to let's repave the
Right.
runway.
Right, that's the difference between operation maintenance and a capital project.
Okay, so maintenance can be looked at as, you know, what are we going to do in terms of big capital improvements? And this determination of maintenance is if one of the vehicles needs to be repaired. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Folda?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for this, you know, really, if staff could get back to us, and I have presented some of these in my briefing, that really, the airport does well when all the users are doing well, right? So we get a lot of our money from FAA due to the number of flights that we use down there, and a lot of that comes from our tourism down there. You know, I'm not sure if everyone in council got the same memo as I did, but that when the tourism's down there laid off 93 employees and furloughed another 14. So there's a huge impact down there, and when the outlook is that we won't get back to normal till about 2025, that's going to impact a lot of people and a lot of funding for what we get from the FAA in the future as well. So really, if we're not using so much money now for employment and operations, you know, what can we do? And it would really be helpful to know where the revenue loss is coming from, if that's from our fuel cells or leases, And what can we do on a temporary basis to, maybe not with this CARE money, but because we have this CARE money, what can we do to support or help other users in the airport, and just look at different uses to be able to keep our airport healthy. I know this is the really easy go operation and expenses, but I think we kind of need to look outside the box due to the, it's going to take, if you're projecting 5 years to get back to normal, that's going to impact a lot of families in Boulder City and our community and our airport in the long run. So if we could just look at other options outside of just, this one's really beneficial. Now that we have that money for operation expense, how can we then use other ways that we can help, either from other grants or because now we don't have such a loss for our operations. So.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just to clarify on something, I've been asked about what is our loss of revenues. It's a little bit in all the categories. So, to answer your question, I'll come back with how much we've received in every category. So, that I don't know what the loss is because I don't know how many people would have, taken a tour on a helicopter. I don't know that, but I can tell you how much we've gotten, which is very little based on what normal operations is. So, just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate the information. Thank you. That will bring us to item number 12, public comment. Public comment during this period is on any issue. Each speaker may speak up to 5 minutes. The phone number to call in is 702-589-9629. Anyone wishing to speak in the final public comment period, the phone number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails or voicemails? Thank you. Again, this is the final public comment period. The phone number is 702-589-9629. All right, hearing none, we will close the public comment period and move to our last item, the City Council reports. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let everyone know that I participated in today's Nevada League of Cities, their annual conference that they had. Unfortunately, it had to be digital. So that was held on Monday and today. I did participate in a conversation where we discussed kind of what the plan is for moving ahead now that we have new members coming into the legislature and what that's going to look like. The difficulties of things becoming more polarized based on unpartisan politics and how that has a direct impact on municipalities as nonpartisan offices. I think people don't realize how that can affect, just some of the stuff that needs to be taken care of at the city level that doesn't play into a lot of those ideological issues. So kind of the challenges of that. And then with the regular business meeting that we had today, it was more just a formal one. Daniel Corona of West Wendover finished his term as the president of the Nevada League of Cities, and I believe it was Christopher Dahir, I believe is how you say his name, from Sparks, is now the new president. Obviously, there's been a lot of turmoil with the league and from the year past, and then going right into the pandemic. So it certainly has been problematic, but they seem to be hopeful that they are now on a good course, and I'd like to believe that is true. And I would like to say I would like to see Boulder City participating more with them, and whether or not that's communication from them or perhaps us reaching out to them. But I think that will be a good benefit for all of us, and not just this city, but all the cities together, working together.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges?
Yes, thank you. The only thing I really wanted to report on was what I sound like a broken record in terms of emergency aid of Boulder City, that the grant monies that we have that help local residents with rent and utilities expire at the end of December, a majority of it. We don't know what kind of grant money is going to be available after the first of the year, but we do have funding for residents with respect to rent and utilities especially. So there's no reason why any resident in Boulder City should be evicted because of the inability to pay today, specifically if they've been in fact impacted by the COVID-19 virus. Whether you're unemployed or can't find a job or your hours are cut, it's important to reach out to emergency aid for that. And as always, we have lots and lots of food in our pantry. So hopefully everybody, I hate to think that anybody perceives that there's any reason why we can't help somebody in Boulder City who's in need. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoskins?
Thank you. Workforce Connection had their virtual job fair on November the 5th. And we had great attendance. We had just under 1,000 registrations and at least 100 emails received with questions. Several positions were filled, and Boulder City presented 4 employers, and there were a total of 15 employers from the other 3 cities. Most of the jobs that were offered were good paying jobs from $10 and up, and a large number offered benefits and training. This was a very positive job fair. A lot of hard work and time was invested, but it was well worth the time and effort. We had a few hiccups, but all in all, we had a great time, and it was all positive and enjoyable. And I would like to thank Michael, Rafi, Lisa, and Jennifer for their support. I could not have done this without them. And then I would like to mention that tomorrow's Veterans Day, and I would like to thank all the veterans and wish them a great day. My husband was an Army veteran, and my daughter is a Navy veteran. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. I just want to speak about, there's 2 surveys going on. One has to do with historic preservation, and another survey was put out by our Boulder City Fire Department as to a survey on their services. So I encourage all residents to give feedback. Those are always helpful for us in our planning and changing things. And those would be, I know they're both available on the city Facebook pages. Also, CCSD continues their food distribution. They will not be there tomorrow, so hopefully you went today and got your double dosage of food to cover you. They are closed tomorrow for Veterans Day. CCSD School Board will be meeting on this Thursday, the 12th, and the big topic will be whether or not to return to a hybrid plan at the beginning of the year. So those with children in school, you can reach out to those school members or watch that meeting. Also, like I said, tomorrow's Veterans, and I just want to thank all the veterans for their service to our country.
Thank you. Mr. Mays had sent an email out last week that reminded me that, we're all suffering from COVID fatigue, and his thanking the employees, the city employees, for the work that they're doing. It's certainly something that I appreciate Mr. Mays taking the time to do that. We certainly do owe an awful lot to our employees for everything they've done. I've been neglectful of saying thank you to all of them. I sincerely do thank them, and I appreciate Mr. Mays putting that out. This is a difficult time. I caught part of the governor's press conference at 6 o'clock this evening. He's essentially given all of us 2 weeks to turn things around as far as the trends are going. If no one's gotten anything out of the actions of the governor, I think it's important when he says 2 weeks, I believe he means that we need to be very cautious. I know our employees here have been doing their best to make sure they maintain the mask, the social distancing, all of that. If we have to go into a period of time where businesses get curtailed again, that just puts all of us in a worse position than we are right now. So we're seeing these trends go up significantly. That's going to put more of a burden on a lot of folks. People really need to pay attention to it and try and get that, be careful, be conscious of others. We did have good news, announcement of a potential vaccine. That will be months away before we'll probably see much of an impact from that, but things are looking up, and I think that, if we all be a little bit smart about what we're doing, that should help quite a bit. I was at a Convention and Visitors Authority meeting this morning. They are currently having their first in-person convention or show since March of this year. And the only reason they're able to do it is because the number of people in attendance is within the criteria that the governor has set. And of course, they're taking all the necessary precautions. They will be finishing up the expansion of the convention center. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, it's pretty impressive. It's a $900 million project approximately. It was being done to be completed in time for the CES show that usually comes each January. CES is not coming this January. So we have a very large building there, and one way to get that filled is for all of us to be careful with what we're doing. Thank you, and we are adjourned.